Hello, my name is Blossums and welcome to another Genshin Impact video, and today we're going to be talking about a brand new Albedo build here. In the latest patch, he's gotten a lot of passive buffs in the form of a brand new weapon that is essentially tailor-made for him, as well as a brand new artifact set that works extremely well on him as well. So if you thought Albedo was a rock-solid option before, I am here to clear your mind in saying that he's an even better option now and burst through his previous ceiling, and his potential is just that much more elevated in this patch. He's so much stronger, and I enjoy him even more than I did previously, as he's going to be a really great option for a lot of teams, especially with the whole, them pushing us towards having like 2 or 3 Geo characters, even 4 Geo characters on the same team with some of the characters that are coming. So that's going to be pretty interesting. He's going to fit really well in those teams. So yeah, in this video we're going to be going over a build as well as other alternatives if you don't necessarily have certain things, and talking about different pairings and teams and just showing off his general potential. And if you enjoy any of this content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, as it helps me out a ton. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the build. All right, before we get into the actual build, we need to know a little bit about his kit, how he works, what he scales off of, etc., his strengths, potentially some of his weaknesses. And basically the way Albedo works is his normal attacks don't really matter. His E skill is what he works around the most, and his elemental burst even works off of his E skill as well. So his E skill is going to be the most important aspect to him. The way Albedo works is you want to place his E skill and you don't have to be back on the field for like another 30 seconds. Let's go ahead and talk about this E skill. Whenever you tap it, it places a solar isotoma, and that generates a giant AoE geo field. And in that geo field, whenever you deal damage to an opponent, it will also deal an additional AoE geo damage proc. This geo damage proc scales off of defense and has a pretty solid damage, especially once you get his defense going. And you will notice the duration is 30 seconds. That's what I was talking about before. You can just kind of place his E and you don't have to come back to him for a while if you don't want to. And it has a skill cooldown of 4 seconds, so you can just replace it if you get like a buff on him or something. So that's very nice, and you can just refresh it whenever you need to. Maybe it breaks or something. It also has a hold function that when you hold it, you can designate exactly where it's going to go. And that's going to be very valuable for a lot of bosses or something, because if you try to place it right on top of a boss, it's just going to break instantly, and then you're not going to be able to get the benefits of the field. And that can become a problem. So sometimes you do need to hold it just to place it in the right location. But overall, you basically just place this and forget about it for the next 30 seconds, and you go off with all of your other characters. Now, I did mention his elemental burst does work off of his E skill. The way it works is that he deals AoE geo damage in front of him, and if the solar isotoma is on the field and he's within it whenever he casts his elemental burst, it will also release additional 7 fatal blossoms that will deal some extra damage all throughout the E skills kind of field. This has a low energy cost of 40 and a low cooldown of 12 seconds. Now, this is important to note. This does not scale off of his defense at all, unless you have one of his constellations. We'll go over those later. But for most of us that are going to be at C0, this is not going to be scaling off defense. It scales off of attack. But that doesn't really matter, because a lot of his damage isn't really coming from this. Most of his damage is going to be coming from his E skill. So defense is going to be our #1 priority here. Other important aspects of Albedo is to note that he has his passive that he deals 25% more damage to opponents whose HP is below 50%, at least his E skill does. And then he also has this, which makes him a really solid support for most teams, to where whenever you cast his elemental burst, it gives an increased elemental mastery stat to all your party members by 125 for 10 seconds, which is really nice, and allows you to pop off with some of your reactions. Another nice thing about Albedo is that these E procs happen every 2 seconds or so in his E skill here, and they generally don't get in the way of your reactions if that's something you're going to be concerned about. If you're trying to run like a vaporized comp or something, generally these E skill procs are not going to be getting in the way of your reactions. So just rest assured there. It can sometimes, but for the most part it doesn't, so you don't really need to worry about it that much. All right, when it comes to the actual build itself, we're going to be using the brand new Husk of Opulent Dreams. This is just, well, a dream on Albedo. It is fantastic on him. It's the only 5-star set that gives us a defense increase, which we were just severely lacking. And then not only that, the 4-piece here is really strong for Albedo, and it reads as follows. A character equipped with this artifact set will obtain the curiosity effect in the following conditions. When on the field, the character gains 1 stack after hitting an opponent with a geo attack, triggering a maximum of once every 0.3 seconds. When off the field, the character gains 1 stack every 3 seconds. Curiosity can stack up to 4 times, each providing 6% defense and 6% geo damage bonus. When 6 seconds passes without gaining a curiosity stack, 1 stack is lost. Now I want you to really pay attention to the second half of this 4-piece, where it mentions that when off the field, the character gains 1 stack every 3 seconds. That just happens. It's not saying he needs to do geo damage off of the field to gain that stack. He just needs to be off the field to gain a stack every 3 seconds. And as we established before, Albedo is largely not going to be on the field because you can just place his E skill and kind of forget about it and gain those stacks without him really ever needing to be on the field. And he's going to be getting an insane increase in his defense and geo damage, which are both of the things that he cares about. Not to mention the 2-piece gives him a 30% defense there. So yeah, this set is basically fantastic for Albedo. Pretty tailor-made for his kit and works very well with him, and is going to be one of the better options. But you do have some other options. I know a lot of you maybe just aren't getting lucky in the domain. It really do be like that sometimes. So you can run some other split sets, some of those being like a 2-piece of the Husk of Opulent Dreams and then like a 2-piece of the Archaic Petra or something, or maybe something like a 2-piece of the Husk of Opulent Dreams and like Gladiator or Noblesse. Those are all solid options. The flat buffs of the defense percent and the Archaic Petra are really solid, and if you can't get a good 4-piece Husk of Opulent Dreams, this is definitely going to be your next best. But if you have neither of those and you're just really struggling for some artifacts, then of course you can run things like a 4-piece Noblesse Oblige or even a 2-piece Noblesse Oblige and a 2-piece Archaic Petra. That's what a lot of people were running before these artifacts even really existed that much, and that's going to be a solid option because it increases your burst damage. And then if you're doing the 4-piece Noblesse, you give attack to your teammates and stuff, which is pretty nice. But other than that, you really don't have that many other options on him. If you really want to do like a normal attack Albedo or something, you could do Retracing Bulleye, but that is not going to be optimal for his damage at all. When it comes to 4 stars though, you do have some other options. You can run things like the 2-piece Defender's Will here. That gives you an extra 30% defense, and that was something a lot of people actually used before this new 5-star artifact set came out, just for that 2-piece set bonus. So even if you don't have a Husk of Opulent Dreams, you could still run like a 2-piece of this on the Feather and Flower, since those don't really contribute to Albedo's damage that much. And then you could run, you know, like Archaic Petra on your Sands and Goblet and Helmet or whatever, and split it up that way. When it comes to the main sets you're going to want to be looking for on Albedo, for the Sands, you're going to want to have defense because, as we said, E skill is going to be where most of his damage comes from. However, you do have the option of running an attack percent here if you want more elemental burst damage, but your E skill isn't going to be dealing nearly as much damage, and most of his damage is going to be coming from that E skill. But the fact that he's getting so much defense percent from this set as well as his new weapon means you can generally run an attack percent here and not hurt yourself too much. Likewise with like an energy recharge sands, even though he has a 40 cost, you could have like an energy recharge sands or something if you want it off of cooldown, if you want to guarantee you have it off of cooldown. But really, I would not recommend the energy recharge sands. You could easily get some of the energy recharge substats you need to get his elemental burst off of cooldown with some substats, so I really don't recommend that. It's mostly going to be a toss-up between defense and attack, and even at that point, defense is still going to be a much better option. You'd be better finding some attack percent substats for yourself. As for the Goblet here, geo damage bonus is just going to be the way to go. If you are really struggling on getting a defense sands or something, of course you could run defense here for the, you know, the short term, but eventually you are going to want to go to a defense damage bonus Goblet here. It's just going to help you out the most. And then of course crit rate or crit damage, whatever is going to be giving you the most for your ratios is going to be the move here. Now it used to be that defense circlet was kind of going to be the move here, especially if you use the Harbinger of Dawn, because you can get so much crit rate and crit damage from the Harbinger of Dawn. Defense percent on the circlet here was actually kind of the way to go in the previous builds, but now that we're kind of using the new weapon and it's a bit better than the Harbinger of Dawn, we can move towards the crit rate and crit damage here. But defense percent is also totally fine here if you really need it and you just can't get a crit rate or crit damage, but you will want to move to that crit rate or crit damage. For the substats you're going to want to be looking for, if you haven't figured it out, defense percent, crit rate, energy recharge, and crit damage are all going to be the most important. Of course, attack percent is a nice cherry on top as well. All of those are going to be needed: crit rate, crit damage, attack percent, energy recharge, make sure you're getting it off cooldown, and even more defense percent can't hurt. I also want to give an honorable mention to elemental mastery, just because elemental mastery can actually help him out a little bit. For when you pick up the shields that he generates from crystallized, they'll be a little bit stronger with elemental mastery. So if you get a little bit of those substats, then it's really not that big a deal, and it's kind of nice. But of course, it's not going to be as good as some of the other subsets, but I wouldn't be too worried about it if you did get some elemental mastery. I actually do want to mess around with an EM build on Albedo that I will be testing out myself, so if that interests you at all, then make sure to subscribe to the channel, as I will be making that video, as it's something I definitely want to do. I just got to get the right artifacts. All right, and before we move on, I'll go ahead and show off each and every one of my artifacts so you know what I'm going to be using for this video and where all of my stats are coming from. As for weapons, we've referenced it enough throughout the video. The Cinnabar Spindle is the brand new 4-star sword that is basically tailor-made for Albedo, and it goes with its outfit, for Christ's sake. It's just made for him. And not only that, it has a defense substat of 69%, nice, and then the skill passive here is insane for him. Elemental skill damage is increased by 80% of your defense. The effect will be triggered no more than once every 1.5 seconds and will be cleared 0.1 seconds after elemental skill deals damage. So basically what this means is it's going to be active all of the time, because his E skill can only proc every 2 seconds anyway, so you are always going to be getting this bonus, and it is going to be scaling the absolute crap out of his E skill. It's going to be amazing for him. But of course there are some alternatives. I will say this is going to be the best weapon for Albedo, in my opinion, but you could use something like the Harbinger of Dawn if you are really lacking in the crit rate and crit damage substats. This is previously what most people use on him. Of course, some of the 5 stars are going to be really good on him. Primordial Jade Cutter isn't too bad, especially with that huge crit rate. And things like Festering Desire are pretty nice because of the extra skill damage and the extra crit rate there for consistency. And that isn't too bad on him, but the Cinnabar Spindle overall is just going to be the best one. There are a couple other 5 stars that are pretty good too, but the Cinnabar Spindle is going to outpace most of them. If you really need to make up some of your stats, then maybe you could consider some of these other weapons, but the sheer stats you get from this weapon that accentuate his E skill, where most of his damage comes from, is going to be just the Cinnabar Spindle is going to be the best pick for that. It's just going to be the best. It goes with his outfit too. Not to mention there is this side bonus to it that a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to weapons, is the fact that currently Cinnabar Spindle isn't really that great on other sword users at the moment. We don't really have any other defense scaling sword users, and what this means is that basically this is designated for Albedo for now until we get another defense scaling sword user, which is pretty nice because then you're not going to need to swap between weapons or anything. And yes, that can hurt your resources by putting them all into a weapon that's only going to be used on one character, but it's also kind of nice because then you don't have to swap around your weapons constantly like I do when I want to use like a DPS with Primordial Jade Cutter and take it off my Kazuha or something. That can be annoying, and that is kind of a nice thing that I personally enjoy and just something I wanted to mention. But this is going to be the best pick. But if you really don't want to level it up for whatever reason, even though it's free and all the refinements are free, then Harbinger of Dawn is probably going to be your best pick. We'll briefly talk about Constellations here, and most of the value comes from a C2 that we talked a little bit about earlier, but the C1 here basically generates a little bit more energy, and the C2 here basically makes it to where his Elemental Burst now scales off of his defense and deals damage, deals extra damage according to his defense, so that is very nice since we are building him heavy defense anyway. His Elemental Burst is now going to scale off that and deal that much more damage, and at this point it is solidified for a fact that an attack percent Sans is just not going to be a decent option for your Albedo. The defense percent is just going to be far better at this point, even though it's already better at this point. This just shoots that up even more, so that's something to know as well. Constellation 3, of course, increasing your levels there. C4 is pretty funny because it gives you extra plunging attack damage in his E skill, and I really wish I had this because I love Zhao, and this would just be hilarious with Zhao, but I don't, unfortunately, and it's not really that great of a constellation, but it's kind of funny, and I think it's cool. C5 increases your levels as well, and then the C6 here is active party members within the solar isotoma field who are protected by a shield created by Crystallize have their damage increased by 17%. So of course, this is just a nice flat damage buff to anybody in your E skill that gets crystallized from it or whatever. And that's pretty nice, but definitely not worth the sheer amount of whaling you'd have to do to get him to C6. As for the attributes of my Albedo, I do have him at level 80 here. Of course, leveling him to 90 is actually going to be very valuable for your Albedo just because he does have a high base defense, and actually getting him to that 90 is going to increase your defense at a pretty significant way. So that is something I wanted to mention. I just don't have him ascended there, but 80 is a more realistic value for most people to hit anyway. And then, of course, for the other stats, we do have him at the 1200 attacks, 2200 defense, and his crit rate and crit damage is 53.2% crit rate, 152.6% crit damage. Definitely could have a better ratio, especially if I had a little bit more crit rate, but this is a-okay for now. I definitely would like to get that crit rate up, and this is just how how much luck I've had on my artifacts lately. As for the energy recharge, I have 109.7, which is relatively low. I've only got like 1 or 2 subsets maybe. I would like to shoot for around the 120 range, and that would make it very easy to get his elemental burst off of cooldown, but in reality it doesn't matter too much because a lot of his damage is going to be coming from his E skill. We also have a geo damage bonus of 68.2 with the goblet, and that is going to increase with the set bonus on the Husk of Opulent Dreams. So that's going to be pretty interesting as well. We'll show that off whenever I actually do the showcase. But then when it comes to the talents, if you didn't notice before, we have them at 5, 8, and 8. As I said, the normal attack doesn't matter. I just kind of like to level up my normal attacks. The E skill is going to be the most valuable and important thing to level up, followed by the elemental burst. And then you don't even need to level the normal, but you can, and that's the least priority. All right, as for teams for Albedo, what you're going to want to know is he's going to pair fantastically with any other Geo unit, especially because that's just one of the better resonances in the game. It is very good for him. I mean, it decreases Geo res, you get increased shield strength. It's just very good for any Geo character. Other Geo characters are just going to pair well, and he's also going to be pairing well with people like Goro and Arataki Ito when they come out. He's just going to be a good pairing for them, but he also already pairs well with Zhongli, even GeoMC, Ning Wang. They're all going to pair well. But other things that Albedo pairs really well with are going to be characters that want to function off of some of the other reactions like Electro Charged, or Superconductor something, or even Vaporize. Honestly, reaction teams, Albedo is going to fit into nicely, even if you're still doing double Geo. One of my favorite teams for Spiral Abyss is like Zhongli, Albedo, like Hu Tao, and Xing Shou. A very strong team, and part of why that team is so strong is because 1, you're getting a shred from Zhongli, and 2, Albedo is going to be increasing your elemental mastery, which is going to be very good. So when you're doing those Vaporizes, they just deal that much more damage. Not to mention, you're just going to be getting that free Geo damage off the field as well. And as I mentioned before, he is almost never going to be really getting in the way of your reactions, so that's not going to be a problem, which is very nice. But he does also pair well with like the Electro Charged and you know, other teams like that. He doesn't pair very well with Animo characters, unfortunately, because there is no real interaction between Animo and Geo. However, you can still make those comps work. Some of the better comps are just kind of like a double Geo, double Animo team. Those work very well. I've seen plenty of people just use like this team specifically, where it's like Zhao, Jin, Albedo, and Zhongli. Though that's a very valuable team. It just doesn't really react or do anything for any of their elements, but those are still solid, and those are an option. But yeah, especially if you're doing things like Overload and maybe you want to do kind of like a fireworks comp, Albedo is going to be a pretty solid option for that, just because he's going to be increasing that elemental mastery. So not only are things like your Vaporize going off, but your Overload is going to be dealing that much more damage, and you get that extra damage off the field. So even if you're not pairing a Geo unit with him, he's going to be great for other elemental characters just because of that elemental mastery increase. And one other thing I wanted to mention is that he's going to be pairing very well with Goro whenever he comes out, because Goro is going to be giving defense buffs. So characters like Noelle and Albedo are going to love Goro, and they're going to be pretty solid together. But also I wanted to mention just the fact that his elevator, whenever a character's on top of it, like Kokomi, they don't really push themselves off unless you jump off or try to walk off or whatever. So that's pretty nice. So one of the tactics I have for the latest world boss is just placing the elevator, putting Kokomi on top and hitting him from the top of the elevator, because she's not going to backpedal herself off or anything. And I do find that kind of fun. So characters that can work like that, like Yoimiya or something, or other ranged DPSs, are going to be kind of nice on the elevator because it takes them off the ground. And for some bosses and stuff, that's going to be very nice because it keeps you that a little bit extra protected. There's also just the fact that he is going to work well with other AoE circle type characters like Ganyu, who has the big circle. Basically they have the same circle size, so you can just control one zone. Kazuha is actually pretty nice despite the Anemo and Geo not working, just because Kazuha can keep them all in that big circle and keep them all together. And when they're together, the AoE procs on the Geo is going to hit multiple opponents, which is very nice. So if you have like an elemental combination that you really like and you're running those two characters, Kazuha or Sucrose along with Albedo is going to be nice just for the grouping and allowing that Geo damage to go even further. All right, that's going to be pretty much it for the build. Let's go ahead and show it off. We're just going to bully the Pyro Regisvine just so you guys can see how much damage he's dealing off of the field. And we'll go ahead and show his stats and stuff while that's happening. And I think you'll be kind of impressed with how much damage he alone is going to be putting out. All right, it's time to bully the Pyro Regisvine for the like bi-weekly, bullying that we do to it. Go ahead and get that shield down. We'll go ahead and give him some Shred with Zhongli as well. Why not? Go ahead and get that E skill going and just show how much damage we're actually doing. You see we're doing 19 Ks off the field there, 21,000 off the field there. And yeah, it's no joke. He can really start to pop off with Albedo there and deal some really solid damage. Let's also check his stats now that he has the stacks of that set going on. You saw we got a little bit extra defense. We're not getting too much more because we are starting to hit that diminishing returns kind of deal with the defense. So we have 125 elemental mastery. That's from his passive after using his elemental burst there. But also you can see that his geo damage bonus has gone from the upper 60 there to 92% right there from the set, and that is one of the biggest parts that the set is going to be given there, so that's really nice. And just so you can see all the stats there. But yeah, he's kind of a monster now, really strong. So yeah, if you couldn't tell, Albedo's kind of a monster now. He does a lot of damage off the field and provides some elemental mastery. There's not too much else you could really ask for. He's very strong, and I'm really excited to be incorporating him in even more teams as his usefulness just went through the roof. Especially now that we're getting these characters that want us to have a bunch of Geo characters. He's going to be fitting really well on those teams too, and I'm very excited for that. As I said, I do want to try out an elemental mastery build on him as well, just to see how beefy we can get those shields. I don't think it'll be that good, but it'll be kind of fun to mess around with. But let me know if you guys enjoyed the video and if it helped you build your Albedo. But other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. My name is Blossums, and I'll catch you later. Peace.